I met her on the subway one morning, and then I got to know her, and and then I got her to write a column for my paper, and then she got me to edit the Witch's Almanac for 30 years.
Oh, so that was
she got me to do the books about magic, and that's how I came to visit all those. I did one book called Magical Mystical Sites, which was 9 European countries, all the magical, so-called magical sites, Stonehenge and the white horses on hillsides, and everything to do with magic in 9 European countries. And then I did one, an occult guide to South America, 9 countries in South America, 9 by accident. And then I did an occult guide to Britain, which was just a book about traveling around Britain and doing, that one actually is it's on my website. If anybody wants a card, it's an occult guide to Britain. You can get that on the website. And actually, today, due to my good friend David there, my book on marijuana, which as an original book was this. As you can see, it's a thick book. It's now an e-book. You can buy this e-book. It's called Marijuana, the Weed That Changed the World.
Zavier.
What brought you to Ojai?
What do I do in Ojai?
What
brought you here?
I've been living, typically for me, I suppose you'll think, I've been living in a nudist colony in Topanga, called Elysium. The reason I was there was that when I came to live out on the coast, I was hired to do these 2 insight guides in London. You've probably seen insight guides. They're very attractive books. They were very pictorial. These are insight guides.
Yes.
They have pictures on every page. Yes. I did 25 of those in the course of doing all kinds of other things. But the woman who did that was Martha, whom I had originally hired to help me with the can and to do the book on Greece and stuff like that. She was working for Insight Guides, and she hired me to eventually do 25 books for Insight Guides. I did California, I did Rome, I did Texas, I did Route 66 and all the western states and so on. I did a tremendous number of books. And when I first came to live out in LA, she hired me to go up to Vancouver and Seattle and do a book about each. And I needed a place to live, and I didn't want to rent an apartment and leave it empty for 2 months. So I went to my old friend Ed Lang, who ran Elysium, and I said, I'd like to join your colony. And he said, well, I'd like to join your community. I said, he said, well, let's see if we can find you a mole hole. So we searched the grounds, and there was a garage that looked like a garage, but was meant to look like a garage. It wasn't really a garage. And Art Kunkin had been part-time living in it, and it had a bed and shelves and a sofa and water outside at a tap, and the hot tub down the 100 yards down into Elysium, no toilet, and I could rent it for $300 a month, and so I lived there for 12 years. Lived in this nudist resort.
But how did you get to Ojai?
Oh yes, so eventually the guy the guy died, and his daughter sold the place, and so I went out to see my former friend Jim Buckley in Montecito, for whom I was writing a column at the time, the Montecito Journal, and he said, well, let's look around, let's go and visit my friends in Camarillo, see if they have any suggestions. We went there, and the guys at the paper in Camarillo said, why don't you try Ojai? Well, I'd already written about Ojai by doing the California book, so I had been there before, and we both said, oh, Ojai. And I came here and found out some woman I'd known from years before was living here, a woman called Lynn Taylor, who had a lot to do with the theatre here. She's dead now, died last year. And she found me a place immediately, and that was about 12 years ago. Been here ever since. Of course, the first thing I did was start a magazine, the Ojai Orange. Nobody would sell it, nobody would exhibit it. Everywhere else that I've started papers and magazines, from the very beginning, I've been besieged by people who wanted to be in it, write for it, distribute it, be part of it. You've been through this experience. This is the first time absolutely nobody was interested in the Ojai Orange. I did actually put it on sale a couple of places. We sold 3 copies a month. And I finally decided that I would cut out Ojai. I would just make it a general magazine about, there's almost nothing. After the first 6 issues, there's basically nothing in any of the remaining 50-something issues. It's all about the world, and it went to all my friends around the world free. I put it, you know, people in Athens and Hong Kong and Australia and Sweden and Rome and Amsterdam and Milan and just everywhere, you know. So it went all over the world for my mailing list.
Any other questions? Maybe a last question before we adjourn.
Are you, some of your books in the Ojai Library?
I'm sorry?
Are some of your books in the Ojai Library?
Yes, they are. And actually, I have a friend, Christo, the artist. Have you heard of Christo?
Yes.
He's a wonderful man. I've written about him many times. And when I told him I lived here, he sent me some of his fabulous books. He's the guy who did those orange things, the curtains in Central Park, and he wrapped the Reichstag and the islands in Biscayne Bay and so. And so he sent some of his books for me to give to the library. But yes, I gave the library a copy of the Warhol book. By the way, the reason why it's called the autobiography and sex life of Andy Warhol, when it's not an autobiography and there's no sex in it, is because I was wondering, I was taping people at the factory for my own curiosity. I mean, I was so fascinated by Warhol that I used to, all the people I knew there, all his dealer and his closest friends and people like that, I would audio tape them. And when it came to a retrospective at the Whitney, we decided we had a book. And so I more or less self-published it. Here again is something I made no money out of. The book was eventually, and Paul Morrissey says, call it The Autobiography and Sex Life of Andy Warhol. So that was the title. We self-published it in effect. By the time Chris found it, Chris is the guy who published
Got a copy of
the
it.
current copy of it.
Well,
Chris,
you can hold it
this
up.
is a German edition. By the time Chris found it, copies of that original $5 book were selling for $1,000 on eBay.
Wow.
And somebody had found one autographed by Andy and was asking $1,500 for it. And that's another book I never made him. I mean, I was once described as famous for not making money. And it's true, I'm famous for not making money. Oh, I wrote down a quotation, and I was thinking the opportunity would come to talk about it, because at some point I was going to talk about somebody exaggerating stuff. And it's such a fabulous quotation that I never got a chance to use it. But it's actually, I think it's out of the Mikado. It's a Gilbert and Sullivan thing. I think Nanki Poo or somebody was accused of exaggeration, and his response was, "I'm only adding artistic verisimilitude to an otherwise bald and unconvincing narrative."
So thanks everybody for coming. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very fun.
Are you hosting all of these?
It was my idea too.
I think that's a great idea.
It is.
I really like it. I like to go in Ojai. Like a New York kind of thing to do. Instead of a meditation night, oh God, yoga night.
You want this one?
Yeah.
Some other one.
I just want to see what you're trying.
Thank you for coming. Nice to meet you.
What did I call
So
it?
maybe
Meet all
they're-
these interesting people.
They're floating around the store still.
Yeah, you get to know.
My darling.
Okay.
Maybe I'll take a look.
Sorry, I missed
Well, Burma's good. We'll take Burma.
that.
Thank you for your idea.
Thank you very much.